What's up, my friends, and welcome into the PHLY Phillies Podcast, and a happy Friday to each and every one of you across the Delaware Valley. We broadcast live from the Xfinity Mobile studio today, and we're brought to you by our friends over at Bet365. Whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. And TrueMark Financial Credit Union, head on over to any one of their 24 branch locations or online 24/7 at TrueMark.com/PHLY to get started. And a happy Friday after the holiday to every single one of you. We are officially in 2026. Welcome to the new year here at PHLY, and thank you for being a part of today's show. Tyler Zulli, Ethan Hartley, and you guys hanging out in the chat. We really appreciate you all for being a part of this afternoon's festivities. We are officially 50 days out until the Phillies' first spring training game in Clearwater in February. It feels like that's a long time from now, but it will creep up on us very quickly now that we are into the new year. But we are officially 50 days away from the Phillies taking the field for semi-real baseball, at least real in the sense that it's not going to be simulated games or inter-squad or going up against the college team. They will face another major league team in just 50 days, which means that we are just a little bit more than that away from the 2026 season. And when I was thinking about being just 50 days away from spring training, anything could happen in the next 50 days because the Phillies very well could not be done, and they still have moves to make. They still have to decide if JT Realmuto will be back or who is the starting catcher. They still have to make decisions on, is Justin Crawford going to be the everyday center fielder? Do they have an upgrade at third base or second base or the outfield, or are there additions to the starting rotation coming in the next few weeks? But 50 felt like an arbitrary number, but a concrete one to say that we are very close to the new season arriving. And again, anything could happen in the next few days, or in the next few weeks, I should say. But for whatever reason, that 50 number kind of pushed something in me. And I think it was a combination of that, plus the Tatsuya Imai news that dropped this week, that made me have a little bit of a shadow of a doubt about this team heading into 2026. So we'll talk about that coming up in just a little bit on the PHLY Phillies Podcast. But here's what's coming up throughout the next hour on the PHLY Phillies Podcast. We will talk about what the Phillies' moves are going to be or not going to be, and what we feel like the direction of this team is going to over the next 50 days. I want to get into an article that was written by Todd Zalecki on MLB.com about Alec Bohm's 2026. We'll talk more about that and what his future holds past this season when he becomes a free agent. We have a Bryce Harper rant for you from our friend Bill Matz on Billadelphia. And as always, we'll wrap up the show. We didn't do it on Wednesday because there was no show. So we'll wrap up today's Friday edition of the PHLY Phillies Podcast with a Remember Me episode, or a Remember Me game. Again, hello to you all and welcome into the PHLY Phillies Podcast. Tyler Zulli, Ethan Hartley producing. We'll hear from him in just a moment. And you guys hanging out in the chat. And as I said, 50 is an arbitrary number, but it's well-rounded. And it made me kind of put the 2026 season into perspective. Maybe it was a combination of that, plus the new year, plus the Tatsuya Imai signing with the Houston Astros. 3 years, very manageable money. There are opt-outs, and we'll talk about it all in just a little bit. But I think the combination of all of those three things really kind of stirred something in me. And this is where we get into our big takeaway segment of the day. It's brought to you by our friends over at Xfinity. Xfinity, imagine that. My big takeaway after Tatsuya Imai signed with the Houston Astros is that I feel like this team is pretty much done. Not to say that I thought the Phillies were definitively going to sign Tatsuya Imai, because I said on Friday, or on Monday, I should say, that it did not feel like I did not feel like they were going to sign him. But the longer his posting period was drawn out, it felt to me like they had a better chance. And if there was an opportunity for the Phillies to get into the Japanese player pool market, this felt like a really good chance for them to do it. A very good pitcher who is not going to cost as much as a Yoshinobu Yamamoto would have a few years ago. And it felt like it was a very sustainable market for the Phillies to get invested. And then the numbers come out. Just a 3-year deal in that $18 to $20 million range per season with incentives and things like that. And the incentives are at pretty low innings pitched numbers. 80, 90, 100 innings pitched. The incentives are pretty low for this contract. Now, there are opt-outs after every single season, which says to me that the Phillies probably weren't real players in that particular market, because we've heard from Preston Mattingly say pretty point blank, they don't do opt-outs. It's just not something as an organization that they do. And if Tatsuya Imai is awesome, like I predict him to be, he may opt out after 1 year and hit the free agent pool next season with a little bit more clarity, with the CBA, the new CBA potentially intact, with the understanding of what markets may look like. Will there be a salary cap floor? Will there be a salary floor? Will there be a salary cap? So it could end up being just a 1-year deal. But for that $18 to $20 million range, that felt like a very playable market. And when I saw those numbers, even knowing that there were opt-outs, and the Phillies, again, don't really typically do that, when I saw those numbers, it kind of stirred something in me for the first time this offseason that maybe as a fan I maintained hope on. And that was that the Phillies would spend a little bit more money. Not to say that John Middleton hasn't spent money in the past. The Phillies, as we said last year, were the 4th highest luxury tax paying team in all of baseball. They've spent the money. I think the look internally is not at John Middleton, but more at Dave Dombrowski, more at the front office as to how they've spent that money and why that there is significant money over the last couple of years being spent on players that are not the contributors you expected them to be, namely Taijuan Walker, namely Nick Castellanos. I think about the comps between the Phillies and the Sixers and the Tobias Harris type of contract, where Tobias Harris was a good player being paid like a great player, and that's within a salary cap structure. The Phillies, though, have $38 million this season invested in Taijuan Walker and Nick Castellanos. And this is not to point those two guys out specifically, but it is to point out a potential misallocation of funds that if they did not have those two guys, now hindsight being 2020, of course, that they would have been able to spend some extra cash, have some extra liquidity this offseason. Because I'm getting the sense that the Phillies have kind of stuck to their game plan, and in terms of cash spending, are pretty much tapped out. Now, that does not say over the next 50 days that they're not going to spend any money. That does not say over the next 50 days, and I use 50 just because it's the start of spring training games. It could be a spring training deal or a signing or a trade that we don't foresee. But unless the Phillies are now to make a trade, whether it be at the catcher position, center field, second base, third base, maybe even starting pitching, maybe less likely in the trade market. But if the Phillies were to acquire a major league player that could make them better, my big takeaway at this point is that it is almost exclusively going to happen in the trade market. Because I think at this point, unless they blindside us by spending a ridiculous amount of money and flying through the luxury tax once again for a Bregman or a Bichette type of player, it does feel like positionally they're pretty much at where they want to be spending-wise. So unless a trade is facilitated, and we're going to talk to Ethan about this in a little bit. He and I were talking about this off the air. Unless a trade gets facilitated or they do decide to blow through that luxury tax, the cash money of the luxury tax, and spend big, my big takeaway this week is that for the first time, after seeing what the MI numbers were, I don't have hope that the Phillies are going to spend any more money. And again, I don't think I'd direct that immediately to John Middleton, even though he has in the past said things like, I want my bleeping trophy back and spending stupid money and things like that. The Phillies have spent a sizable amount of money over the last couple of seasons. Where my concerns go are to misallocation of funds, and that goes to the front office staff that signed players. You're not going to hit on 100% of the players that you sign, but I do think in this regard, if one of those two guys ended up panning out, you'd feel better about the spot you're in. Or if one of those two guys weren't signed, and again, hindsight being 2020, you would potentially have $18 or $20 million to spend in this offseason where you could much better use that money to better this team. The Phillies have won 90 games 3 consecutive years. So the Phillies have been a good team for 3 consecutive years. But I think for a lot of fans, and we talked about this on Monday, the difference between a regular season successful team and a postseason successful team is where a lot of fans are drawing the line. And I can't fault you for that because it's now been 3 straight years of regression in terms of losing the NLCS, losing the NLDS, losing the NLDS. And in terms of that, you are 2-8 in your last 10 postseason games. And so for that regard, I can't fault you if you're frustrated and say, yeah, they're a good regular season team. They win over 162 games. And the reason being their starting pitching is really, really good. And they have the upper hand in that regard most series over the course of a 162-game stretch. They also have some really good players over 162 games who have not shown up in the postseason. And so that disconnect for a lot of fans is palpable. It's real. And I can't fault you for it. But at this point, unless something unforeseen happens, I'm not so sure the Phillies are in a spot where they're going to do much more in terms of spending money. And that's where I'll welcome our second member of today's program into the show. That's our big takeaway, by the way. It's brought to you by our friends over at Xfinity. Xfinity, imagine that. Let's welcome our second member of today's program, our producer, our co-host. That's our friend Ethan Hartley. First of all, Ethan, a happy Friday to you. And you and I were talking off the air about unforeseen trades, and you brought up the name Jesus Luzardo from last season and how we really didn't expect that type of trade. And we'll get into that conversation, I think, a little bit later. But I don't know what it was about the Imai signing specifically. I think maybe the money and the years more than anything else. But it kind of snapped something for me that said it really does feel like the Phillies aren't going to do a whole lot much else, monetarily speaking. What's your feel heading into January, heading into 2026 about what they're doing in terms of free agency specifically?
I mean, it makes a lot of sense to have that when you look at what Ranger comparisons we have done. And, we see like Michael King at 25. Well, I think it's pretty reasonable to say Ranger's better than Michael King. So you now creep into that 30 number. Then when you think, well, it's a little more than half or a little less than half. I think I said that right. But one way or another, you're talking a significant decrease in what you would have to pay for Ranger when you might get a Ranger quality player if the transition works out correctly. So to not have this opportunity to put yourself in the mix to almost buy low on your replacement player, it says a lot about what really matters in terms of what this team is trying to do. And I think really it just seems to me that it's going to be a JT re-sign and small moves here or there. I'm not really sure. I don't even think I'd really be impressed with a Bader re-signing as well if that is it at that point. Like you're going in basically with an identical team and saying that, all right, this is what we're going to do, especially hitting wise.
Yeah, and I think we were talking about it right before the show. The moves that they've made. The obvious one was bring Kyle Schwarber back, which I think you had to facilitate that move. The power is undeniable. The production is undeniable. The off-the-field stuff is undeniable. And so all of that, I think you and I were in lockstep, like, make it happen. Figure it out. Make it happen. This has to become a thing. Once you do that, you look at what the rest of what the Phillies have done, and so far it is signed Brad Keller, which I thought was an excellent signing. I did not expect it for, $10, $11 million. It's a little bit of a hefty price to pay for a reliever, but it's a 2-year deal, who had a really good year last year with the Chicago Cubs. We talked why I thought it made sense. Fastball velo up, slider really good, sweeper added to the mix, good arsenal, good mix, pitched really well in Chicago. Trade Matt Strahm for what we believe to be cap relief, or hopefully to get cap relief because you get Jonathan Bolin back, which to me feels like a step in the wrong direction in terms of productivity for next season specifically. So when you look at the offseason as a whole, the expected move was Schwarber, and then it's bullpen work. And Adolis Garcia obviously in the mix as well at $10 million for one season. It's hard for me, and I think it's probably hard for a lot of Phillies fans right this moment to say the Phillies are definitively better. Now, definitively better means can they be productive in the postseason? I think for a lot of people. Because as we said, 3 straight years of 90 win seasons. It's a good roster. It's an aging roster, but it's still a good roster. And it's still probably one of the better rosters in the National League. But for a lot of people, a move that was not all-inspiring, a move that hasn't transpired yet, that's not all-inspiring, means running it back. for the most part. And running it back for a lot of people feels like banging your head against the wall.
100%. And I mean, it's been one of my biggest gripes that, in MLB especially, it's all about the run that you go on, and running with the same thing twice just kind of brings that insanity type of feel. It's like, when are things really going to change? And so I think we definitely milked the idea that at this point it's going to take a lot. It's going to take just dramatic differences amongst those players themselves, instead of, I think, what most of us believe to be the more realistic idea of bringing in different players to have different results.
Yeah, and that's kind of what we're going to get into in the next segment with Alec Bohm, specifically with Todd Zalecki's piece on MLB.com, because I think I'll say this to kind of preview that piece. I think Todd is right in the sense that the Phillies are better if Alec Bohm has a better year. I think he's right in that regard. Mm-hmm. But I also think that there feels to be an oversimplification of, well, if Bohm's better, then they're better. And that is something that we can hang our hat on. So that's something that we can look forward to. So he's correct in the sentiment, but I also think there needs to be more to it for a lot of Phillies fans. And so let me ask you point blank before we hit our first break. If the Phillies do what we expect them to do the remainder of the season, or the offseason, which is re-sign JT and maybe tweak around the edges a little bit here and there, are the Phillies better in 2026 than they were in 2025?
Considering what they're going to lose, I mean, you're losing some portion of Zach Wheeler, whatever that might be, at least some decent chunk. It's not going to be, a couple of weeks. It's going to be
June.
You're looking at a month,
July,
months, yeah, and Ranger, and relying on Painter to fill that, and
Crawford.
Yeah, and seeing how that might pan out. Again, Alec Bohm, especially, and maybe some other players, might save that idea, but my initial thought is no. Just flat out, what you're losing.
I think it's a fair initial thought. I tend to agree. I think the Phillies, as of right now, are going to be a step back from where they were in 2025. And that doesn't necessarily mean that they're not a postseason team. That doesn't necessarily mean that they're not a good team. But I think if the way that I project them heading into 26 is a step back from what we've seen over the last two seasons. And unless something drastic, I don't want to say drastic, but unless something unforeseen happens to change that, I think I'm heading into 2026 with less expectations than I did last year, than I did in 24. Certainly than I did in 24 after the way that they got bounced in 23. So I think that unless something kind of unexpected happens, my expectations are heading in the wrong direction. All right, let's take a break. On the other side, we will get into this conversation about Alec Bohm. We have to hear from Bill Matz, and we'll hear what Billadelphia thinks about Bryce Harper heading into 2026. And we'll wrap up today's show with our Remember Me segment like we do each and every week. It's the PHLY Phillies Podcast. We broadcast live from the Xfinity studio, and we'll be right back after this. All right, so you found your special someone, that person that you want to spend the rest of your life with. Now you know what the next question is. Well, before you even pop that question, you're going to have a million different questions about the perfect ring for your partner. That's where our friends at Bucci Jewelry and Design come into play, because you don't know, or maybe you don't know what the 5 C's are, how much money you're able to spend, what your budget is going to get you. It is a stressful experience. I've been there. That's why working with our friends Joe and Michelle at Bucci Jewelry and Design has been a game changer. They make the process seamless. They make you feel like family. You're not just a customer to them. You are one of one. They actually listen to you. They help you figure out what your partner is going to love, and then their team designs something completely custom right there in-house. There's no pressure. There's no pushy sales vibes. It's just good people who love what they do and do what they love. So next time you need that perfect piece, go see Joe and Michelle at Bucci's Jewelry and Design. 30 plus years in the game, voted Philly's #1 jeweler year after year. Over 1,000 5-star reviews. You can check them out at BucciJewelers.com and tell them that we here at PHLY sent you. All right, with the winter months in full swing, you know that means we have an incredible slate of sports across a bunch of different platforms, whether it be pro football playoffs about to start, college football playoff in full swing, and how about this, pro hockey, pro hoops, and college hoops, all right there for your watching enjoyment. And if you call yourself a sports fan, you have to get Xfinity. There's no lagging, no buffering, no switching between apps. It's just the best sporting destination where you can find all of the best games and your favorite teams all in one place. It's the perfect fan flex where you get all of that action right there in your living room. And with crystal clear optics, enhanced sound with 4K, it's going to feel like you're at the arena or at the stadium anyway, and you don't have to worry about battling traffic and paying for tickets. And sometimes you can have up to 4 games going at once with the quad box, because why not? You can. And on top of that, you get real-time notifications and live stats right there on your TV. So next game day, make sure that big fan in your life isn't a big fail. Tell them to learn more at Xfinity.com. Xfinity, imagine that. All right, welcome back to the PHLY Phillies Podcast. Tyler Zulli, Ethan Hartley, and you guys hanging out in the chat. Thanks so much for being a part of today's show. Really quickly, I do want to make mention about one thing that I didn't get a chance to say in that first segment was, you know, I think the conversation about run it back is a little bit muddied, a little bit blurred in the sense that, like, if you look at the team that they're going to put out there in 2026, your center fielder, likely different. Your right fielder is different. You have a new bullpen arm and multiple bullpen arms, I should say, because I think that there is a very realistic opportunity for a Keller, for Jonathan Bolin, potentially for Zach McCambley, potentially for the lefty that they signed out or they traded for with the Diamondbacks, whose name is escaping me at the time. But like, if you look at the roster construction, it is a different roster from 2025. Turnover happens all the time. I think the run it back portion of it is you're looking at a roster construction built similarly, where you have a platoon in left field. You have a reclamation project in right field in Adolis Garcia. You have very little power out of center field, and you are still thinking about how to upgrade 2 of your 4 infield positions. That, I think, is where people are talking about, where the argument for run it back, it's not necessarily the players, the specific players. It's more about how the positions are constructed. You're talking about running back a platoon, running back a reclamation project, running back a defensive first center fielder, who, by the way, I really like, and I'm really excited to see what Justin Crawford can do at the major league level. I would feel a lot more confident about Justin Crawford getting his opportunity if there was either a power bat in right field, a legitimate, trusted power bat. That doesn't mean Garcia can't bounce back, but I'm not banking on it. If there was a legitimate power bat in right field or an everyday left fielder that I felt a lot more comfortable with, I think I would feel great about giving a guy like Justin Crawford the opportunity to play every day if those things were true. But when you add that to the already known quantities of a platoon in left, which, by the way, we don't know who the platoon piece is going to be unless it's Otto Kemp, which they're kind of hinting at that it may be Otto Kemp. We don't know what the platoon looks like, with the exception of what's internally already here, and a right field position where, you know, you're asking for a guy to bounce back to form from what's going to be 3 seasons ago. 2024 was a good year for Adolis Garcia. It wasn't the stellar year that he had in 2023, but it was a good enough year. If you get 2024 Adolis Garcia, you feel okay about what you have in right. If you get 2025 Adolis Garcia, you're not feeling real excited about what you have in right field. And my worry that we talked about when they signed him was that the regressions are there in all the wrong places. Bat speed, chase rates, whiff rates, those types of things are heading in the wrong direction. We know when he makes contact, he hits the ball hard. It explodes off of his bat still. He's at the exact same exit velocity last year that he was in 2023 when he hit 39 home runs. The problem is all of his other metrics are heading in the wrong direction, and his bat speed has slowed down. So when you think about the roster construction, it's not the same players, but it feels like the same identity. And that, I think, is why people are frustrated about the run it back portion of this thing. All right, let's get into our next conversation, which is this article today, or dropped a couple of days ago. I saw it today, which was from Todd Zalecki, that is headlined, "A return to form season for Bohm could be key for the Phillies in 2026. Now, Ethan, you were looking at an article, a different article, similarly written though, about bounce back player candidates for each team, and Alec Bohm was the player on that list. And I think, as I said in the first segment, a bounce back year from Alec Bohm would be a welcome sight. No question about it. 2024, he was an all-star caliber player. 2024, he drove in over 90 runs. 2024, the numbers were really good. He was heading in the right direction offensively. Last year, there was an injury that hampered his season a little bit, but it was definitively not the same season. So why don't we take a look at 2024's numbers compared to 2025's numbers to get an idea of what a bounce back, in between type of year could look like. Actually, the average was better in 25 than it was in 24. But obviously, the RBI way down, the home runs down slightly. But the big thing that really kind of was the knock was the extra base hits were way down. Because in 2024, Alec Bohm was a doubles machine. He ended up with 61 extra base hits, despite the fact that he only hit 15 home runs, which means that he had 46 doubles and triples. And we know he's not much of a speed guy. Most of those come from the doubles department. Last year, only 32 extra base hits with 11 home runs. So that means just 21 doubles and triples in 2025. Slugging went down almost 40 points in large part because of that gaps power regression. Would a 2026 return to form for Alec Bohm be a welcome sight? Without question, no doubt about it. But as Ray Schumacher pointed out in the chat a little bit ago, if the team hinges on the success of Bohm, they're in trouble. And I think that that's where the separator has to come into play, is that, yes, a Bohm return to 2024 form would be a very welcome, excellent sight for this team as he heads into his free agent year. A lot of times players have breakout seasons or all-star caliber seasons when they head into a free agency type of offseason. And so I think for Alec Bohm, this is a paramount year for him personally and for the Phillies as a team. Because as we've said kind of throughout the offseason, my expectation is that Alec Bohm is the starting third baseman for this team. And I think that that's kind of been what I've been banking on for a majority of the season. So if you can get more doubles, more extra base hits from Alec Bohm, and the power being what it is, if he hits 15, 17 home runs over a full season, I think you probably are going to sit in that world if he plays 150 or so games. But if the doubles can come back, the slug can come back a little bit, the RBI total, now that's predicated on the rest of his teammates, of course, getting on base. But if the RBI total bounces back a little bit, it will certainly be a help for the Phillies offense. No question about it. The defense has gotten better over the years. He's become more serviceable as a defender. I don't think he'll ever be excellent or elite or great or any of those words, but he's become good enough to be an everyday third baseman defensively. A bounce back would be welcome, but it's not the only thing that would be a difference maker for this team. And so, Ethan, that's kind of my point as to where I'm getting at here. And when we talked about it before the show, it's like, this would be nice, but it can't be the only step forward. If it's the only step forward, then you're probably looking at a similarly constructed lineup as they had in 2025, which put no pressure on opposing pitchers behind Bryce Harper, which put no pressure on opposing pitchers after Trey Turner, Kyle Schwarber, Bryce Harper, where Bohm was hitting in the 4 spot in the postseason, where Brandon Marsh was hitting 5th, where JT Realmuto, all of those guys, those 3 guys specifically, if you can slot them down just one spot, you have a much better constructed lineup. If Bohm could hit 5th, if Marsh could hit 7th, if JT could hit 8th, in some way, whether it is getting that kind of resurgence from Adolis Garcia or finding the pop elsewhere via a trade market or something along those lines, if you could kind of structure that lineup in a way where they hit in more natural spots, that's where a Bohm return to form would be beneficial for this team in 2026.
Yeah, I think even the idea and concept, if he does bounce back and is still hitting 4th, that's just not good enough. I don't think he's ever shown that even in the season prior that, his numbers are worth that kind of spot to be behind Bryce Harper and apply more pressure to pitchers. So I think to that exact point, the ceiling doesn't even really go up that much further, because if it is a return to that form, it still wasn't enough. You saw a first round exit to the Mets. So
So Bohm's OPS and OPS plus in 24 were career highs, 780 OPS. And again, that's probably never going to get over 800 because he doesn't hit for home runs, right? More of a doubles guy. It's never going to get to that 800 plus mark. But his OPS plus was 114, which was his career best. And then in 2023, as Todd points out, he did have 20 home runs for really I think it was the only time in his career he broke the 20 mark. But the RBI numbers are more important to me, which of course is, again, predicated on the rest of his team, which is why it maybe is becoming a little bit of an antiquated stat. But if the extra base hit number gets back up into the high 40s, if it could be the 50 mark, that would be ideal. But if he can get the extra base hit mark back up into that high 40s, into the 50s, I don't expect him to hit 63 at 40 some odd doubles that year. Hard to duplicate that when you're not hitting, 20 or 25 home runs at least. But if he gets into the high 40s, low 50s, and can get the slug back to like a 460, 470 mark, I think that is a very beneficial thing for the Phillies. But I'm not banking on it as the only thing that the Phillies can count on in 2020. That's kind of my separator between the two.
Yeah, 100%. And again, as I've touched on, even if that is the case, it still isn't enough. There still needs to be, I think, more power behind Bryce Harper. I think Pete Alonso would have been the perfect candidate for that if it made sense to replace him with Schwarber or just, blow through the luxury and sign both of them as well. I think that would have been a dream. But it needs to be that kind of player, in my opinion, to fill out your 4 spot. Or you put Schwarber there and, rearrange Gene 3. But you and I have talked about that, and there's still some nuance to that doesn't fully seem like the easiest thing to just flat out do.
Right. And so that's why, to me, you're asking a lot from a 21-year-old kid who's never played in the big leagues before. But in a perfect world, in a world that gets constructed in a lineup that's fashioned in the best way possible, to me, I would almost try to figure out a way to go, and I know you have 3 lefties in your top 4, but I would almost try to figure out a way to go. They're not going to do it right away. This is a pipe dream down the line type of scenario where it's Justin Crawford, Trey Turner, or Justin Crawford, Bryce Harper, Trey Turner, Kyle Schwarber, somewhere in that, in that mix, right? Those 4 guys in your top 4. But I can't rely on a 21-year-old kid making his major league debut to be that guy. The very likely scenario is when Justin Crawford makes his debut, whether it is on opening day or soon to follow afterwards, I bet he probably hits 9th. And so you are looking at Trey Turner leading off, probably Kyle Schwarber hitting 2nd, Bryce Harper hitting 3rd, and who behind him? And that, I think, until we figure out what the scenario is for a Justin Crawford trajectory, you're still trying to figure out what a cleanup hitter looks like for the Phillies in 2026.
Or you're getting an Adolis resurgence, and that somehow works out. But we haven't seen that in a couple of years, and I think there is more numbers that jump out as more scary and more negative to that narrative than just a little retooling here and there, or just getting healthy.
So if I had to ask you right now, and obviously there's still over 80 days until opening day. If I had to ask you right now, who is the cleanup hitter on opening day? Who's your answer?
It's probably Bohm.
It's probably Bohm, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of people are going to be really pissed off about that.
Yeah.
My guess is they're going to try Garcia in that spot a handful of times.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what kind of length they give him in that spot. Because like as you said, in a perfect world, if the power resurges, even if it's 25 home runs, it's protection power-wise for the other 2 guys. Because there's no chance of Bohm hitting 25. Garcia has an outside chance of getting to that, upper 20 number. If that's the case, then it's Garcia. And it's an easy plug and play in that spot. I've said plenty of times, I don't expect that number. But I do think, as of right now, if you said to me, construct the opening day lineup, Alec Bohm's probably hitting 4th.
Yeah, he's probably more of a holistic threat of a hitting player rather than what I think is the tools.
What's the Patrick Starr where he's got the
Yep.
the pennants? Yeah, that's how I feel right now.
The sparklers.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right, let's take a break. On the other side, we got to get into the Billadelphia segment of the day. Bill has a rant for you about Bryce Harper, and we'll let you hear it, and then we'll talk about it on the other side. And then, of course, we'll wrap up today's show with a little Remember Me. It's the PHLY Phillies Podcast. We broadcast live from the Xfinity Mobile Studios, and we'll be right back after this. Whatever the moment, it's never ordinary with our friends over at Bet365. You find out why 90 million users worldwide have teamed up with Bet365 because they are the live in-game betting pioneers. You can get in on constantly changing lines, and you can live stream 780,000 different events each and every year across 78 different sporting platforms. They offer awesome early payout across the NHL. If your team goes up by 3 goals at any point, your bet is going to be marked as a winner. And how about this? Right now, new users who sign up with Bet365, use that promo code on the bottom of the screen there, PHLY365, deposit $10, place a bet for just $5, and you'll get $200 back in bonus bets, whether your bet wins or loses. You can use that bonus bet money on spreads, totals, player props, futures, and a heck of a lot more. You find out why it's never ordinary with our friends over at Bet365. You must be 21 and physically located in PA. If you or someone you know has a gambling problem and wants help, please call 1-800-GAMBLER. Do you really want one of your starting pitchers pinch hitting in a big spot? Of course you don't. It's not worth the risk, the time, or the money. You want to keep your stars focused on what they do best. And the same can be said for your business. You don't want your top people buried in operations, the tedious, time-consuming, redundant activities that not only take their time away, but also wear them down. You want to make sure your impact players stay fresh and focused on what they do best. That's where our friends at Togo come in. They're an integrated part of your team that take the work off your starters' plate so they can focus on making your company and your business move forward. Every engagement starts with free process mapping and engineering, and there is not a dime billed to you until the real work begins. And with each Togo program, they include a dedicated staff, custom automation, and a US-based process engineer team who act as your quarterback while you stay in control. At Togo, they turn your playbook into performance. You call the shots, they execute your way, and they advise along the journey. Visit harnesstogo.com to scale smarter, work faster, and stay focused on winning. All right, welcome back to the PHLY Phillies Podcast. Tyler Zoli, Ethan Hartley, and you guys hanging out in the chat. It is time to get inside the mind of Bill Matz. I hung out with Bill a little bit earlier today, but Bill said, I'm not done. I want to talk a little bit more about Philadelphia sports. So let's get into our Billadelphia segment of the day and see what's going on in the mind of Bill Matz.
We need to talk a little bit about Bryce Harper. Now, first of all, I love Bryce Harper. He is one of my favorite Philadelphia athletes ever because of the way he embraced us. Some people might want to call it pandering, and that's what it was early. 100%. Coming out in the Fanatic sneakers, all of that. Everything he did to ingratiate himself to we, the fans of Philadelphia. It was pandering early on, but I kind of learned to accept that that's just kind of who he is. He'd never really been part of a community like ours before. He's from Las Vegas. He didn't grow up with hometown teams. He went to the Nationals. Who the hell even cares about the Washington Nationals? And then he signed what was essentially a lifetime contract with the Philadelphia Phillies, becoming one of us. So he wanted to dive headfirst into that for the first time in his life. And I appreciate that an immense amount. But we are now at the point we're beyond that. He no longer has to prove anything to us, and the workout videos are just getting a little bit tiresome. Yes, I am glad Bryce Harper is internalizing the not elite comments that Dave Dombrowski made. We have to see if he's going to be a superstar or just a really good player in this league. And honestly, Dombrowski said what we're all maybe a little too scared to acknowledge. Bryce Harper did not have an elite season, and that either means, hey, it's a down year, it happens, or premier athlete in his 30s is no longer what he used to be, because that happens all the time. Let's take a quick look at Bryce Harper's season last year compared to the top 10 National League MVP vote getters just among the hitters. So it's the top 11, but I had to take Skeens out of there. So it's top 10 voters. Last year, Harper, Baseball Reference WAR 3.1. 2025 top 10 MVP voting, the average was 5.8. He's almost half of Baseball Reference wins against replacement. That OPS of 844 of Harper's, 867 was the average. Home runs, 34 and a half. Harper had 27. That's nowhere near enough. And if we want to throw some RBI in there, because why not? People still love that stat. 75 versus the average of 97. Let's not forget Trey Turner. Was in that top 10. It's not like he's driving in a ton of runs. 97 is a soft average right there. He only had 75, did Bryce Harper. He is nowhere near the elite player he was, let's say, when he won MVP in 2021, when not only was his OPS approaching 1050, he hit 35 home runs and led the National League in doubles, had another 42 of those. Only 32 doubles for Harper last season. He's not close to what he was. Now, if he is just posting these videos because this is who he is, I suppose we just have to accept it. But this just kind of feels a little like when a little kid is like, I'm mad. And they sit there and make a mean face because they want you to know they're mad. All right, man, you know what I need you to do? Go out and hit 10 more home runs than you did last year. Go out and hit 10 more doubles than you did last year. That's all I need. I need you to come through in the clutch in the postseason. That is what we need out of Bryce Harper. At this point, I know he's putting in the work. I know he's in the cage. I know he is using whatever he can to motivate himself. I don't need to see it. I just need to see the results. I don't know why this specific thing bothered me as much as it did. Because, again, I like Bryce Harper, and I know who he is as a person. He's the showman. He lives his life in public. He is the embodiment of a superstar MLB player, even if maybe he isn't one anymore. But I just need to see you go out there and do it. I'd rather you go completely dark on social media this offseason and then come out and have a top 5 MVP caliber season rather than let's go along for this social media journey, because that just kind of feels contrived. And I don't know if I ever felt that way about Bryce Harper before. I always thought there was a level of just genuineness to the way he presented himself. This one just feels like a little kid going, I'm mad. I have a not elite shirt on because you called me not elite. You weren't. The end. I don't know what else to tell you. If you're internalizing that in order to build yourself back up to what you were, great. I don't need to see it. I just need to see the freaking results.
All right, so I think the reason that we haven't talked much about this outside of when we did the post-season, post-mortem press conference was because I thought that it was I don't want to call it a throwaway comment. It felt intentional, but I thought that it was a comment that would just be a one-time thing, meaning that Dave Dombrowski is the type of president of baseball operations, the type of GM who has earned enough cachet to say something like that about his star player and be allowed to get away with it. And Bryce Harper, in turn, was the type of guy who was able to take that type of comment because he's pretty, thick-skinned. He's been through the ringer since he was 16 years old as a high school kid, hitting home runs in Tropicana Field and being the number 1 overall pick and having expectations and, kind of growing up into going from the villain to the guy that everybody loved to everywhere in between. And so I thought that it was one of those situations where it was like, strange that the president of baseball operations would call out his franchise player like that. But I think in this particular instance, in a vacuum, these two guys are both able to do the things that they do. And Harper was able to kind of shrug it off and use it as motivation. I will, however, say this. If he's using this as internal combustion, that's great. Because I think that means that the Phillies are going to get a potentially better version of Bryce Harper than they did in 2025. Bryce Harper would probably be the first to tell you it was not an elite level season from him. It was a good season, and it was a season that if a player that did not have the pull of Bryce Harper, again, I'm going to use the word cachet of Bryce Harper, you would have said, hey, heck of a year from that guy. It was a fine year from Bryce Harper, and it was not one that I think it's probably one that we would like to leave in 2025. So I think two things can be true at once. This, to me, feels like it's overblown at this point on both sides. Dave Dombrowski probably didn't need to do it in public. Bryce Harper probably didn't need to be the not elite shirt wearer posting on Instagram guy. And also, if this is what somebody in his mid to early to mid 30s is going to use as motivation to become the player that he would like to be in 2026, then so be it. I don't really have a whole lot of care for this story other than that. But I do think it's been a weird setup. All in all, because I'm surprised that the GM said it publicly. I'm surprised that Bryce Harper didn't brush it off. I'm surprised that we're still talking about it, quite frankly. But I think if you're going to use it as motivation, if you're going to use it as fuel, then that's only beneficial to the Phillies. And it's only beneficial to us. And it's probably only beneficial to Bryce Harper. So to Bill's point, was Bryce Harper elite last year? No, he was not. He was not. It was a good year. It was not an elite year. Can he become elite again? As Dave Dombrowski said, that's up to him. But I think that this is now something we can all move on from together. Real quick, Ethan, I want to get your thoughts on kind of Bill's take, this whole situation. Because as I said, when Dombrowski said it, I was in the building when Dombrowski said that. We all kind of, I looked at Jim Salisbury was with me and a couple other writers and things like that. I looked at everybody and went, that was interesting. Not used to hearing a president of baseball operations kind of put out a challenge to his franchise player. At this point, I think we can put this to rest. But I guess I just wanted to get your thoughts on this kind of whole situation as it's played out.
Yeah, this is like I can't think of a good comparison other than just like Ben Simmons' social media summers. It's like, okay, we'll see this thing, and then in Ben's situation, never, ever panned out to what he would always love to proclaim on social media that, yeah, I have a jump shot, and yet I will still never use it in game. So in that regards, I get it to that. I think there is some defending of yourself to a comment like that. That's a pretty big thing to say from a guy like Bryce Harper, who has been at the top of the mountain before. And,
sure.
Whether he believes it himself that he is still at the top of the mountain or not, to hear it from somebody else, I can certainly understand that aspect. But to me, I certainly agree. This is a thing that we need to move on. What matters more is the results of the season and the seasons prior, and that they were beyond disappointing. And a lot of that does fall on him. And so I would much rather see you get off of social media, focus on yourself, detox, whatever that is, move on, instead of kind of feeding into this a little bit more. Do that after the fact, maybe do that after the results. As Broad Street Bullies, made the funny comment of like Jason Kelsey's Super Bowl speech, have that moment for yourself after you've already won, after nobody can take away what you've already done in winning a World Series, not beforehand leading up to it. And then, you could very much end up sort of like Ben Simmons in that you never actually step back to the top of the mountain, even if you believe it or not. Other people don't believe that. I think that's kind of what matters more when you choose to put that on social media, because I don't think people are defending you now in that situation after the postseason and the postseason prior you just had.
Yeah, I think the difference between that and the Simmons stuff, though, like the work has been put in by Bryce Harper for years now. Like he's a former MVP, multiple time MVP. Obviously, won here in Philadelphia. He's a multiple time All-Star. The guy's won Silver Sluggers. He's transitioned from becoming an outfielder to an everyday first baseman, and he's really quite good defensively at a new. It's not new anymore, but at the time, at a new position. It's one of those things where there's a whole lot more credence for me here than in the Ben Simmons situation, because it was like with Ben Simmons, it was like, okay, let me see it. I need to see it. You've been doing this every offseason now. I'll believe it when I see it. For Bryce Harper, it was like, oh, yeah, I think you could get back to that form. Obviously, it was a down year for your standards. Still a good year, but it was down year for your standards. I think in this particular instance, Bryce Harper has earned the ability to say, that feels like a low blow. Let me kind of take a pot shot back. And at this point, you've both, screamed at, basically the swing first type of thing. Like you both said swing first and, puffed out your chests. And now that's it. It's time to move on to 2026.
Right. I do think that the timing, though, in that, what are you puffing your chest about at this point? Like you had a down year. You really flopped in the playoffs, especially looking at it from an at-bat sense, would just swing on the most ridiculous pitches that you and I have probably seen in that given series. And so I can remember us watching and just always being frustrated. It's like, what are you looking at? Like, can we have any kind of patience at the plate? So I think to still be in that moment and now, portraying this image, trying to convince others and convince your general manager that you are still elite after that performance, I think just doesn't sit right with me in the fact that, these are your most recent results. This is where your time is now. History is history, and you were a phenomenal player at this point, but we need you to be the best that you can right in this moment because of how much we've invested in you and around the players around you.
I think that this will be an interesting year for Bryce Harper because I do think it is a pivot season for him in terms of his career. Like he could still be a very, very good player for the next 6 or 8 seasons, or he could, bounce back and have an elite level type of year. And I think it is kind of a pivot point season for him heading into 2026. But I think I'm ready to squash this thing and leave it in 25 for good. But we had to talk about it. Bill went on his Billadelphia rant about it. So that's brought to you by our friends over at Togo. We'll take a break. On the other side, we'll wrap up today's episode with a little Remember Me, and I'll tell you what the category is on the other side. It's the PHLY Phillies Podcast. We broadcast live from the Xfinity mobile studios, and we will be right back after this. New year, new you, right? That's what they always say. And if you're thinking about that with your finances and you've been waiting to take an advantage of a great offer to boost your savings, that's where our friends at TrueMark Financial come into play. They are offering a limited 5-month certificate at 4.25% APY. And with a minimum deposit of just $500, it's super easy to get started. So whether you're thinking about a special goal, whether that's a vacation, or, maybe popping that question to a special somebody, or you're just thinking about your emergency fund or want smart ways to make sure that your money works just a little bit harder, this certificate is a great option. You can open your certificate today at TrueMark.com or by visiting any one of their 24 branch locations. Annual percentage yield is accurate as of 12/15/25 and is subject to change. Certificate requires a minimum deposit of $500. Federally insured by the NCUA. Visit TrueMark.com for full details. Again, visit TrueMark.com for full details today. Whether your favorite team wins or not, there's always another way to win with our friends at the BetParx online casino app. You can check out incredible new casino games like Huff and More Puff and Fireblaze Sky Queen, which is a BetParx exclusive. It's just a small reason as to why it's the only app that I would ever use to play all of my favorite casino games right there in the palm of my hand. I can play blackjack, roulette, craps, slot, poker, baccarat, and so much more. And those hot online slots like Cash Eruption and 88 Fortune, or incredible slot games based on your favorite streaming shows like The Walking Dead, Squid Game, Peaky Blinders, and so much more. And how about this? Right now, new users get up to $1,000 casino bonus back if you're down in the first 24 hours. So what you're going to do, head on over to betparx.com, download the app right now, and enjoy all of the action and the excitement right there at the casino, right there from your fingertips. You must be 21 and physically located in PA, New Jersey, Maryland, or Michigan for BetParx. You love to play, you play to win, you bet, BetParx. Gambling problem, please call 1-800-GAMBLER. All right, welcome back to the PHLY Phillies Podcast. Tyler Zulli here hanging out with you for another couple minutes. Let's get into our Remember Me segment of the day. We didn't have a show on Wednesday, so we'll do it today on Friday. Ethan, today our category for Remember Me is World Baseball Classic inspired. I am stoked for the World Baseball Classic. USA's been announcing its roster for a while. Going to be an incredible team. Front-end rotation, Scoobal Skeens, that's just gross. Those guys are going to be headline. And then I think we're on a collision course for a USA-Dominican Republic championship. I mean, the DR roster is unbelievably talented. And I'm not usually like the biggest World Baseball Classic fan, just because I get into baseball as the spring unfolds, like in terms of like real play. Like I almost have a ramp up period as a fan. This World Baseball Classic, I am locked in on. This is going to be a really good one.
Yep, looking forward to it. I have never really been one to follow it all too much. I think I usually watch the final series
Sure.
when I can. But yeah, the lead up to it, I'm looking forward to getting into it a little bit more.
So today I decided that we were going to do it based on World Baseball Classic rosters. These are all players who have been on Team USA's roster throughout the years. So that is your clue or your category today. Let's get to number one here for you, Ethan. And it is a right-handed pitcher, as you can tell, was on the 2017 Team USA roster, finished in third place in the 2013 American League Rookie of the Year voting, and was eventually traded for 3 MLB caliber players, 2 players at the time, and then a player to be named later who also is now a Major League caliber player. Who is this player, and can you remember who it is?
I think based on clue number 3, is this Chris Archer?
It is, in fact, Chris Archer. A well done on number one.
Nice.
to me, Ethan, one of the worst trades of recent memory. So the Pirates acquired Chris Archer and sent Tyler Glasnow and Austin Meadows to the Rays in exchange. And not only did they send those 2 guys, the player to be named later that they sent was Shane Baz, who ended up, having himself a Major League career and then being traded this offseason to the Baltimore Orioles for an absolute haul. One of the worst trades of recent memory for the Pirates.
I think I saw even now that Shane Baz has been traded to Baltimore, I think I saw another extended tree of what Chris Archer brought in for the Orioles or for the Rays, and it's just ridiculous. Yeah, I remember when that happened, and I don't think I cared too much about it. I think
sure
Meadows was a fine player at the time. I didn't know too much about Glass now, but yeah, what it's turned into now is pretty funny, and it's funny that looking at those 3 hints that was the one that pointed out to me most. And that, yeah, I remember this move just being absolutely disastrous for the Pittsburgh Pirates.
Awful trade. All right, let's get to player number 2, who has former Philadelphia ties, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in just a little bit. Clue number 1 is this guy pitched for Team USA in 2013. He finished third place in the 2012 National League Rookie of the Year and had 9 consecutive seasons of at least 10 wins or more, and at one point was in the Phillies farm system.
Oh, 1 point in the Phillies farm system. 2013.
Has 131 career wins.
Wow. So he would have had played fairly recently.
Yes, his last season was 2020.
Ooh, a little earlier than I thought. 2020. What team was it in 2020?
He was with the White Sox in 2020. Not really pertinent to his career. Was kind of just trying to hang on.
Yeah.
Won 21 games in 2012, the year that he finished third in the Cy Young voting. Was an all-star. Finished runner-up or third-place runner-up. R.A. Dickey won the Cy Young that year. Clayton Kershaw finished second that season.
Marco Futt's pointing out great flow. I agree. I'm honestly even trying to use that as a hint.
I think you should. I think it does play a part of it.
Oh.
He was traded in part by the Phillies in 2005.
Oh, wow.
As part
Archie
of
Bully says Gio Gonzalez.
It is Gio Gonzalez.
Oh,
yes, Gio
wow.
Gonzalez was traded in part with Gavin Floyd to the Chicago White Sox in exchange for Freddie Garcia, which obviously did not end up being a very lucrative trade for the Phillies. He was then traded later by the White Sox to the A's for Nick Swisher. The A's traded him to the Nationals for A.J. Cole, Tommy Malone, Derek Norris, and Brad Peacock. And that's kind of really where his career took off, was in Washington. That's where he won 21 games and was a really serviceable pitcher for the Washington Nationals for quite some time. It is, in fact, Gio Gonzalez. All right, now I decided that we were going to go with 2 probably easy to medium ones, and then we bumped it up to an 8 or a 9 on a 10 scale difficulty. But before we do that, before we get to the last one, I want to say thank you to everybody on our streaming services, Roku, Samsung, Xfinity. If you're want to watch the rest of the show, head on over to allphly.com to watch the rest of the show. It is officially time for overtime. All right, now this last one, Ethan, is a very difficult one compared to the first two. Let's get to player number 3, and I will walk you through this one. 2009 Team USA roster. What really stands out is the longevity of his career, a 21-year career with 11 different teams, and he is 10th all-time in Major League appearances. He is one of, I want to say, 12 pitchers all-time with 1,000 appearances, but I am going to double-check that number for you, just so I have the right number. Sorry, it's one of 16 to have at least 1,000 appearances. He is 10th with 1,042.
...2009 roster. So
pitched until 2015.
Oh, okay.
I would say spent the best years of his career with the Minnesota Twins. Then kind of bounced around for quite a while. Career 4.3 ERA, but had several seasons in Minnesota with a, sub-3 ERA.
Brushy Bully says Rhodes.
It is not Arthur Rhodes, no.
Ray Schumacher says Oswald, but I think he corrected himself afterwards. I don't know. This is like right on the brim of when I really started understanding baseball. So I don't think if this player was super relative in 2015 or like really good.
Yeah. So he was a starter for his first couple of seasons, gave up the most runs in baseball in 1999. Twins converted him to a reliever, posted a 3.3, and then had 2.1, 1.8, 2.6, 3.8. Was really quite good for a long time. Then had a little bit of a dip, and then rebounded in his late 30s, a 2.1 in 2009, a 2.4 in 2011, a 2.9 in 2013 at the age of 40. Was a very up and down guy, but when he was on, he was on.
I don't know. I think I'll have to give this one to me.
This is LaTroy Hawkins, who spent, a majority of his career with the Minnesota Twins, but pitched for 11 different teams, including the Rockies, Cubs, Astros, Brewers, Mets, Orioles, Angels, Giants, Yankees, and Toronto Blue Jays. Up and down reliever, but when he was good, he was really, really good.
Yeah, lined up perfect for his Team USA appearance. So
good
for him.
Yep. So Team USA when does that start? When does the World Baseball Classic start? It's got to be early March 5th. We have a little over 2 months until that gets started. Yeah, I get it. That was a pull. That was definitely a pull. All right, that's going to wrap up today's PHLY Phillies show. Big thanks to everybody who's hanging out in the chat today with us. A happy new year to you as we welcome in 2026. Big thanks to Ethan Hartley for producing and co-hosting today's show. We'll be back on a regularly scheduled time next week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, here for the PHLY Phillies podcast for our first full week of the 2026 season. We are 50 days away from the first Phillies spring training game coming up in late February. So until that time, have a wonderful weekend. Enjoy everything that the sports world has for you, and as well, have a wonderful weekend with your family and friends. And we will talk to you again on Monday, right here on the PHLY Phillies podcast. See ya.
We all silly like the mayor.